Hi, this is Roger, and fly, go away. Yay. Thanks for dropping by. Sorry, totally distracted. I'm not feeling too clever at the moment. Basically, it probably has something to do with being woken up and got up at 3:45 this morning. But it served a purpose because basically, you know, it's like, you know, especially when you get older, you wake up, you need to go to the toilet. And having done that, my mind started going because I had a lot to do today. So I got back in bed, you know, it's cozy like that, you know, next minute purr in the ear hole and all that on the flip, you know. I thought I'd just as well flip and get up. I've got a lot to do today. And most of it was computer stuff because the virtual table display competition, I'd had the 4 sets of judges' points in, and I've got to work out the winner. So basically I have to add up the 4 points and divide the answer by 4 to get an average, which is the score for that particular person's plant. So you get it goes to 2 decimal places. It's quite amusing, really. But anyway, I thought, well, I've got to do all that, and that all has to be put in a, you know, in a document to be sent off to the guy who keeps the records for the competition for the whole year. Because at the end of the whole year, there's actually a check for the person who's got the most points in the 2 categories. So I thought I can get all that done, and then I have to the photographs that go to the judges have got the plant name and their sequence number and their class embedded in the photo, so that has to be edited on and the photo saved away. Well, once the judging's complete, I've then got to put the person's name on the photo and whether they came first, second or third. Otherwise it's just the name, but that means each photo has to be edited again, and then the folder has to be zipped and everything and mailed off to the guy to put it in the newsletter, and the results for everybody have to be sent off to the guy for the records now. So I thought I'll just get on with that. It's early in the day, you know, it's nice and quiet. We sat here peacefully. On top of that, I ran out of milk, so we're on the black coffee now. That means no sleep tonight. So I've got all my computer stuff done, and we're running, because we can't have our Christmas lunch this year, we're having a Christmas Zoom meeting. And at the Christmas lunch we still have the competition tables, so we have the open class and the experience class as normal, and people bring plants in, and the judges come up with the, you know, the first. But at that do, we have a people's choice where all the plants are given a number, and we don't know whose plants they are at that point. The card with the person is turned upside down and tucked under the pot, so we don't know whose plants they are. And each person has a card, and they write the number down of which plant they think is the best one, and they all go in a tub, and then they're sent away and you know, to one side, counted up, and we have a people's choice winner, and there's usually a nice piece of glassware or something. There's actually a good prize that you keep, you know, it's yours. So we're doing that, and I said, well, I'll volunteer to do that. So again, I've got to get the photos. They'll have to go into a PDF file so that it can be mailed around to everybody so they can vote. And then the winner will be announced at the Zoom meeting, which we're having instead of the party. And apparently we might have to wear silly Christmas jumpers or a silly hat or something. It's being thought about. But I was up, basically. So the trouble is, when you're up really early like that, you run out of stuff to do, and then you've got the rest of the day and nothing really to do. I mean, lots of people say I take on too much. Well, if I've still got large chunks of days with nothing much to do, then I'm not that busy, am I? Frantically busy followed by nothing for ages, you know. So what I thought I'd do today is go round the plants. I might get some down, because a lot of people ask how long I've had plants, and because I lost my records in the great laptop crash of 2020, I love these silly names, basically a lot of those records are gone, they're lost. So all I've really got are things that Zaina managed to recover for me, and she couldn't do all of it. So some plants I know I've had ages, but I don't know how long. And I've also lost the data of where I actually got them from, which is a shame, because I like that sort of detail. But a lot of people say, you know, how long have you had this plant, and does it flower every year? Or have you got it to flower yet? Have you bloomed it yet? Well, I count a blooming for me with the spikes and buds that I've grown and bloomed, not the ones I bought it with. I don't count those. So if I buy a plant in bloom, which is often the case, I don't count that blooming as being mine. So I've then got to do it again. Now, quite a lot of the plants I buy, things like Cattleyas, the Oncidium Alliance, they're going to bloom every year, aren't they? Most of my dendrobiums are going to bloom every year, but there are a few in here that never have and may never. Depends on circumstances. Now, my two Vandas, I've had those quite a long time, and they both bloom. The one with the big blue flowers didn't bloom this year, but that's because it had half its root system hacked off. That'll kick back in again next year, no problem. And coming along the back, there's a Phalaenopsis type dendrobium. I've had that a long time. That's the Thai Angel, and it's the split, because one of them's in bloom up there. Can you see that? Possibly. So that's one in bloom, and then the other part of that plant, the other division, is up the back there. That division hasn't bloomed yet, but the plant has. Yeah, and I've had that a long, long time. That went 3 years without blooming, just to show you how long I've had it. And it bloomed last year, and it's bloomed again this year. So I've had that at least 5 years. Then I've got the Nobly Prima Donna. I've had that absolutely ages. I've got another Nobly here that I haven't had long, because that was bought last year in bloom in the middle of the year. And the canes on that are absolutely enormous. Then there's a Brassia there, that was got last year, so I haven't bloomed that. Yeah, so that's the Nobly and the Brassia. I haven't bloomed, they were in bloom when I got them, so they're ready to go. We've got this Latoria here. This is a new acquisition, so this hasn't bloomed yet. I suspect it will in the not too distant future. It'd be better if it didn't have a mealybug on it. Well, that was a big one. Just one. Never mind. And then there's another Latoria. Is that a Latoria type? Can't remember. Yeah, that was a Latoria type. So neither of those have bloomed. Those have been bought very recently. They're this year's plants, and they have yet to bloom. They weren't in bloom when I got them. So we've got those to come. What else have we got? We've got the Phalaenopsis type black something or other, wasn't it? Thailand black, Sarnook Thailand black. Now I haven't bloomed that, so that's another one that hasn't bloomed. My Sarcochilus hartmannii, that's looking quite sorry for itself, quite honestly. That was a very young plant when I got it. I've managed to bloom that once, but it hasn't bloomed since, so that's not so good. Down in the shady cooler stuff, the only thing in there that hasn't bloomed, quite honestly, there's a Renanthera in there. That's the one that had the stem rot, and I had to cut it off, and it had one root left, which I put in moss. I'm keeping that a bit shaded at the moment till it gets a root system, so that hasn't bloomed. None of my 3 Renantheras have bloomed. Underneath there is a young Victoria Regina, that hasn't bloomed. There's also a Psychopsis that hasn't bloomed, and in there I've got nope, everything else in there has bloomed. So, right, down underneath there is that, is my, somebody asked how my Cymbidium spike was doing. Well, it's pushing on nicely, so growing, that's all that matters. What else have we got down here then? We've got this one that Zaina gave me that I'm supposed to produce a seed pod for. I need to deal with that leaf as well. I wonder what's done that. If that got wet or something. Now this is a, oh God, I was told how to pronounce this, but I've forgotten. So you'll have to read it yourself. but I'm confident that it begins with a W, and that's pronounced V with that word, and there's another W in the middle that's also pronounced V. So anyway, that hasn't bloomed yet. That never has. It may never bloom. That's a difficult one. Let me just get my scissors. I'm not happy with that. That leaf looks wet. So we'll have that off straight away. No point in leaving something like that and putting it back and then forgetting about it. Yeah. Strange. Oh well, these things happen. So that hasn't bloomed. What else have we got then? We've got my two odontoglossums. Both of those have bloomed, but not done it for a very long time. They're rescues. My Dendrobium hibiki, that was bought without any blooms on it. It's bloomed once. The canes are getting bigger and stronger. It's becoming a large plant. Eventually it's going to bloom. But it did produce one bloom. It has actually had one little cluster since I got it. That's my Coelogene nitida. That's bloomed several times. I've had that a while. But this is the hibiki. Now this is growing on well. It's putting on. All the canes, the little young growths, are growing into good sized canes now. So it's becoming quite a bush here. Quite a bush. There's a few kikis coming up halfway up some of the canes. So it's putting on an awful lot of growth. My pinguiculars are not doing their job properly. But at the moment, there's no more sign of any buds. So the first lot of buds that I produced that bloomed have gone, and there's no sign of any more yet. I suspect when this does bloom, when it does get round to it again, it's going to be quite a show, because I suspect there'll be quite a lot. But not yet, but it has bloomed. That's the main thing. That's what we're sort of going over today. Nitida. That's bloomed. That's coming back into growth. Ooh. And then up here we've got two Disas. One has bloomed, although you say it's bloomed, they only ever bloom once and then they die. So effectively they grow new plantlets around and those grow on and those eventually bloom, but they only ever bloom once and then they die. So you can't say, oh, I've bloomed that one loads of times, because you haven't. But I did buy a new one this year. That hasn't bloomed yet. Hopefully it will next year. There's another Psychopsis there. It's got a very, very poor root system, and it's currently dormant. It's doing absolutely nothing. No new roots, no new growths, but it has got a spike with a bud. When that blooms, if that flower develops and blooms, that's not mine, because that was there when I got it, but the next one will be, because they're perpetual, one bloom after the other. One drops off and another one forms. So that's that one. Don't dip the leaf in your coffee. And then we've got another new, that's a Latoria cross, Roy Tokunaga. That hasn't bloomed yet, but it's a new acquisition. Too much water in the tray, so that's yet to bloom. I did lose a lot of my Latorias, that's why there's quite a few new ones around. That is a replacement rather than a new one. There's a new Cattleya here that hasn't bloomed yet, whatever that is. That's the Laelia purpurata variety striata, and it was in bloom when I got it, so I haven't bloomed that yet, but it has bloomed. And then there's the one up here from the other, one of the ones from Zana. This is a Oncidium species, something morphum, chrysomorphum, and this had no roots at all when I got it. Well, it's made up for it now, and it was in bloom when I got it as well, and I haven't bloomed it yet, so I'm still waiting for a new growth to develop, followed by blooms. So I haven't bloomed that yet. Nonetheless, we've seen the blooms because it was in bloom when I got it. So that's that lot. Now we're getting to the point now where practically everything will have bloomed, because a lot of the new stuff's here. So that's why they all sort of came together like that. Right, some of the ones from now on I might not be able to get at either. Now the giant, come on brain, Brassica. Vericosa, or whatever it is. Sea Breeze, I remember that bit. That was in bloom when I got it, and I have since bloomed it. It was stood on the floor with, you know, took up the whole flipping grow room. So that I've bloomed before. There's my epidendrum with the lovely orange flowers. That I've had quite a long time, nearly lost it. Then there's 3 cattleyas there. All of those have bloomed. There's my sotoanums, both of those have bloomed. All of the dendrobiums through here have bloomed, except for that chryseum, the monster, that just hasn't. That's decided to go into autumn at the moment, and it's dropping an awful lot of leaves all over the place. That could be a good sign, because if it's one of those that blooms on the leafless canes, it hasn't had any yet. They just keep growing. So maybe now it's dropping some leaves. We might get some blooms on those canes next year. That one hasn't bloomed. Going along there's my Genmanii. That's got buds pushing out the top of the sheath. That's going to bloom again soon. That's bloomed. My Lindleyi bloomed unexpectedly. My Loddigesii, that's the Kikis. The main plant went to Insa, so he's got that, but that has bloomed several times. But the Kikis haven't grown on enough to become blooming size yet. The Laelia up there with the 4 spikes, that was in bloom when I got it, but it's going to bloom again soon. This one I've had a long time. This blooms regularly around this time, in November, December time. This is just coming into bloom again. Some good spikes on here this time because they've got numbers on them. I mean, this spike here has got 4, 5, 6 buds on that spike. Lovely red. 5 on that spike that's pushing out. So with this plant, what it does is it pushes out a new growth that looks like that. It looks like a pea pod, yeah? It's a closed leaf. And then the leaf opens up, and there's 2, and the spike comes up through the middle. So that's effectively how they bloom. They don't always have 2 leaves. Sometimes like this has only got 1 leaf. This is another new growth next to it, not a leaf on the main plant. But yeah, that one I've had a long time, Cattleya cernua. Blooms regularly, and that rests, it does nothing for about 6 months. And then it comes back into growth. And all the new growths come out roughly together and bloom roughly together. Unfortunately, they don't last very long, but very attractive blooms. Back up where it goes. So that's that lot up there, that lot. Over here, this one hasn't bloomed yet. This was got in the Christmas raffle last year. So that hasn't bloomed. That's a Epidendrum Lanipes, I think it is. And this is its best growth this year. That looks a comparable size cane to these 2 over here, which are old canes. Now, I don't know whether that plant has ever bloomed, you know, like before I got it. I don't know, one way or the other. But it's growing on, and maybe it will. The other side of there's another one that hasn't bloomed, and again, it may never bloom because it's the highest light plant I think I've probably got. It's this African one, Ancelia africana. It's growing okay, I suppose, but that lives in Africa, it's all in the name, you know, right in the tops of the trees. You'd have a job to get much brighter light than that. And without the good light, it won't bloom. So I don't know whether I will ever bloom that or not. That was a gift, basically. So we shall see. But I haven't got high hopes for that. I'm just happy to let it grow. It's on a mount. It gets watered with the other mounts, you know, not in the way. Although it has caused a couple of accidents in the past because the mount's so large, and it's actually knocked other mounts down by falling off. So up there we've got a new plant here, so and this I believe is a young plant. That was a gift in my last lot from there. Schwerter, that's a Sophronitis species. No new growth since I've got it. But it's a happy little plant. It's got growing root tips. That's good. So there's that one not bloomed yet. That's a bit young to bloom yet. My one that we nearly lost because it started to rot badly, and I lost 2 new growths consecutively here. This one, very popular orchid, long-lasting blooms. It's a little lemon drops crossed with Encyclia or Encilia on my label because there's a C missing. Let's get that sorted. Vitellina, but it's now growing a good strong new growth, so it's recovering, and in addition to that we've got some active roots growing now, so that's going to make it. At one point I thought I'd lost that plant, but it's going to make it. It'll be fine. And then this thing up here is, I don't know. That's new. Oh yeah, that's another one of the gift items that were put in the Schwerter order. So that's an SLC Seagull's Raindrop crossed with Catletonia, why not? So that's going to have interesting blooms. They won't be huge and they may not have a lot in the first blooming. That's a young plant growing on. It hasn't bloomed. It may bloom on the latest growth. It's probably going to be the next one. So that's a long way off. And then that mount is half of a plant that's been blooming every year since I got it, so that's not a problem. Right, that's everything. Now we come around to here. All of the plants on here are Cattleyas or Lalias. They have all bloomed. There's nothing up there that hasn't bloomed. My 2 Renantheras in pots, neither of those 2 have bloomed. So I'm waiting on them reaching blooming size because they have yet to bloom. They're both growing. They pushed up new leaves since I got them, so they are growing. It's a matter of getting them up to blooming size, basically. And then on this shelf, we've got a something Francis Fox that hasn't bloomed yet, new plant. My Dendrobium delicatum has never bloomed, but that's a kiki growing on, so that's, you know, that's got some work to do yet. It might actually bloom on this year's growth. The growth itself looks big enough, and it has got the nubbins, so that might actually bloom. And then we've got the Zygo, one of the intergenerics. That was bought in bloom. I haven't bloomed it. The Zygo was bought in bloom. I haven't bloomed it. And then the 2 black hair types, Formosum and I nearly said Infundibulum, I'll get shot. Infundibulum. Yeah, see, I can do it. It's just remembering at the time. One of those was in bloom, the other one wasn't. Neither of those I bloomed myself. The Rossioglossum we repotted in the big session I've just done, that hasn't bloomed yet. The other Coelogeny down there, the Moriana, that's bloomed several times. Again, there's one Cattleya up there that's never bloomed. I forget what it is, but there's one up there anyway on that shelf. And I thought I did get this out so that we can see it. The bulbophyllum blooms are getting there now. This is the Elizabeth Ann Buckleberry. So we haven't seen this in bloom for some time, but it's in bloom now. So we've got one nice bloom there, another one not fully open over here, and then another one to come. So there's 3 at the moment. I'd have expected a few more, quite honestly, from other parts of the plant. But this got moved to better light, and it responded almost immediately with some spikes. But the light it's been getting has been one-sided. The main light would have been here. So the other side would have been more shaded. And that could have just been over the edge between, yes, there's enough light to bloom, and no, there isn't, on the same plant, because it's so flipping big, it's heavy as well. Yeah, grubby mix there, that's the algae on the pot. Right, coming down here we've got my Griffithianum Farmeride cross, that's bloomed many times. We have a black hair type, that's the infundibulum crossed with Lowii, that's bloomed quite a few times. We've got the huge Miltonia spectabilis, I think that one is. No, that's Reginellii. That was in bloom when I got it. I have yet to bloom it. So we need new growths on that, get going. Luckily that won't need a repot because it hadn't long been done by Sarah Burnham's. The large plant behind that is Dendrobium, it's either Spectabile or Speciosum. Spectabile, I think. That hasn't bloomed yet, that was a present from Zana. Coming around here, we've got all of the Miltoniopsis, the hybrids, were all bought in bloom. None of them have rebloomed yet. Most of them nearly died. They're recovering quite nicely now. We've got the new species from Burnham's. That's yet to bloom, but hopefully that is coming up to blooming soon. We've got the species, the Miltoniopsis phalaenopsis that we've just repotted. That has yet to bloom. Up here we've got Laelia anceps. That's bloomed many times. It did miss 1 year out. We've got this one. This is the phalaenopsis type Dendrobium I was talking about that's been split in two. One half's bloomed, but I've had that a long time. That's bloomed many times. Lovely, you know, as Dendrobium phalaenopsis go, those blooms are quite large, and I like this plant a lot. So that's that one. Then we've got this one here that's in bloom that I've only just acquired from somebody who died at the Orchid Society. So I haven't bloomed that. That'll need a rebloom to count. And then we've got, next to that is the Dendrobium that was in the latest repotting session. That's just, so I'm just trying to get this back where it goes so that I can see the main. It's got 3 blooms one side and 4 the other, so I like it to face 4 outwards, not 3. So that's that. This Dendrobium that's just been repotted in the latest section is Lovely Virgin Angel. I have bloomed that about 4 years ago, and it hasn't bloomed since. It's just been sitting there not growing and nearly dying ever since. Right, up here we have Tolumnias, many. Some of them, these little tiny ones in these little tiny pots, these are new. So these were in the Scroata order. They have yet to bloom. The others have all bloomed except one, and one of the ones up there is from Lynn. And that has a spike, I noticed last time I watered it. I think it was this one. Was it this one? No. So which one is it then? Ah, it's got to be that one then, hasn't it? That was one of these two. Yeah, it's this one. This one came from Lynn. Tolumnia White Beauty, and that has a spike. So that'll be its first time blooming. But that will be my spike. So that's good. The other larger Tolumnias, they've bloomed many times. There is a Kiki up here from Rachel, some time ago, Comet King. That was allowed to produce 1 bloom there. You can see it was some time ago, and it shouldn't have happened because that cane was too small. That set the plant back, allowing that to flower. If it tries to bloom on the latest growth in the spring, I'll see how many buds it produces, but we will allow it to bloom. It's got a good root system on it now. It's a healthy plant. So if it wants to bloom, we'll let it, but we might not let the full set of blooms run. I don't want to drain it and set it back. This is my Primulinum variety Laos. That has not bloomed yet. That could be a young plant, might not be. The Primulinum canes, because I had that one as well. I think that's gone to Insa, so he'll get the blooms on that next year. Primulinum canes are 4 times, 5 times as long as that, but the variety Laos may actually be a much smaller plant. That I don't know yet. So that's that one yet to bloom. Coming along this side, Kaneko bloomed many times. The little bulbophyllum. This is going mad. This is chucking out new growths everywhere. There, 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 another one here, another one over here, and this one that's pushing on, and another one, yeah, I mean that's just pushing out new growths everywhere, which is good. We like that sort of thing, when plants go mad. My Senilia's bloomed several times. What the hell's that? Ah, that hasn't bloomed yet, that's Dendrobium tortilli. But, given its latest two canes, I think it will. Those are two good canes. I think we'll get some blooms on that now. But that was a young plant, you know, canes this size, growing on up to this size, and then onto this. That came from Alberto in Italy, that one. There's my Glomeratum that I'm going to throw in the bin very soon. It's pushing its luck. It just will not grow. It's grown nothing for ages. The canes pushed on. They've now finished growing, and there's no new growth and no new roots. Unfortunately, it has the most gorgeous flowers, so I'm hanging on to it, but it's not happy. My Kaneko blooms on and off. Then we've got Tiny Twinkle, Big Twinkle. That hasn't bloomed. That's a relatively new plant. It's a black hair type. Has it got a name on it? Yes. Coriniferum, and that has yet to bloom. That cane could be big enough to bloom now, but we will have to wait and see. It would be nice if it did. That's a black hair type. Dendrobium harveyanum, that bloomed well for years and then just stopped and nearly died, and I'm trying to get it back again, but it's definitely bloomed. I've got 4 Orangus there, 2 of which were on the same, they were the same in the same pot. They've gone on separate mounts. None of those have bloomed. They're all replacements basically. We've got this strange thing, which is something I've never heard of before. It's a Mexicoa, and I'm not for the life of me going to attempt to pronounce that, but you can read it if you like. I'm not having a go at that. But that's basically what it is, and that's yet to bloom. That's a young plant growing on, basically, so I don't know how long I'm going to have to wait for that. We shall see. Twinkle, twinkle, twinkle. Aliciara. This has been recovering for years. It has now recovered. It's got some good new growths on it. This latest growth here may well bloom. I was surprised that big one there didn't, but it will bloom probably next year, but it will bloom. More twinkles, and then there's a Oncidium sweet sugar up in the corner. That has bloomed. Then it went into a state of recovery. It's now mounted and recovering nicely. And there's my Shelob Tolkien up there, and then there's this tiny little Dendrobium. It's the rarest plant in this place. Oh no, it isn't. That's the rarest plant in here. That might not even exist anywhere else apart from where I got it from, because that is the Miltoniopsis roazelli, and it's the variety Xanthina, sorry, which is the yellow one, crossed back with itself. So that's probably unique to Burnham's. Actually, I'm not sure it came from Burnham's. It might have come from Eric Young, but you know. But this little thing is Fangxinsianense. It comes from a valley on a mountainside in China. That valley only. That's the only place it's been found. And it wasn't discovered until about 2010, 2009, 2010. So it hasn't been around in the world long, as in being discovered. So to actually get that in cultivation, I debate where that came from. Anyway, it was a gift. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. So that's gone round, that's the lot. We've been round, okay, I haven't looked at every individual plant, but you can see in amongst those are some plants that I've bought not in bloom, that have yet to bloom, but when they do, they'll be my blooms. There's quite a... oh, I forgot the ones on this table. Right, we've got that one. That's my challenge plant, which is still in bloom. I don't think those blooms are going to last much longer. And this spike was on it when I got it, so it's half and half. I did actually get the spike to grow on and open, but I didn't create the spike. So there's that one. There's my Dendrobium alexandrae. That's bloomed quite a few times. It's not a very healthy plant at the moment, but I think it's going to work on that next year. But anyway, that's bloomed several times in the past. My Victoria Regina, those are my blooms, so I'm happy with that. And I've got a feeling that's actually showing that reasonably blue today. Camera has much trouble with this. On some days it looks pink, on other days it is a lovely deep colour. So those are my blooms. These are not my blooms. The Oncidium sotoanum over there is the one of the parents of the twinkles, and this is the other one. These spikes were already on it when I got the plant from Burnham's, but they have opened here. So there's those. And then the two intergenerics in the corner there, they were in bloom when I got them. So those are not my blooms. I've got to grow some new growths and get those to do it again, as they say. Yeah. So I don't count plants that I buy in bloom. And let's face it, a lot of the plants we buy are in bloom, aren't they? Because we see the pretty blooms and that's why we buy them. Pretty blooms must have and all that stuff. So that's just to go round the plants today. It's given me something to keep my mind on it and stop me falling asleep on my feet. So that's that lot. Personally, there's a big DPD wagon outside the house. I can't believe he's got anything for me. I don't think I've ordered anything. So no, he's gone the other way. I haven't got anything outstanding. So yeah. So as far as I'm concerned, if I buy something in bloom, I don't count that. I have to then grow it on and get it to bloom again, and then I class that as mine. Ones that are in bud when I get them and the blooms then open, that's like halfway, you know, because they could have blasted, you know, or the spike could have failed. So you've done some work to get those blooms, but you haven't grown the whole thing, you know. But most orchids tend to progress in the way of a new growth which then blooms, another new growth which then blooms. There are some that repeat, like quite a lot of the dendrobiums will bloom again on the same canes. Some of the phalaenopsis type, some of the latoria types, some of the black hair types. They will bloom again on the same cane. So different thing altogether. But most dendrobiums, the place that they bloom from won't bloom again. So even on a phalaenopsis type, if it pushes a spike out of the apex, which is where the first spike normally comes from, if it blooms again on the same cane, it will normally come from underneath the first leaf, a little bit lower down. But I have known one push out a second cane from the apex, straight out of where the first one came. Nobelies will bloom on a leaf node, you know, opposite a leaf on the other side. That place will never bloom again, but the cane can. If it hasn't used all of those nodes, it can bloom again the following year. Vandas repeat bloom up the stem, monopodial. So yeah. Oh, and my little mounted phalaenopsis has opened another bloom. This is difficult to appreciate just how pretty these blooms are because they're so tiny. I don't know how close I'm going to be able to get, but you can't appreciate the patterning and the delicacy of that little bloom. It's gorgeous. You know, you've got striping and spotting. You've also got an orangey centre and a purple edge to the lip. It's just a very attractive little bloom. And this is an extension basically. Now that it's got a spike, it will extend for some time. With phalaenopsis that do that, when the spikes get too far away from the plant and have been doing it quite a while, you'll often notice a bloom will come out that's a little bit smaller. At that point, that spike's getting tired. With me, I take them off and then allow it to grow some leaves and some roots and then push a new spike up. Not everybody does. Some people will sort of say, you know, well, if it's going to bloom, we'll let it. It's fair enough, I suppose. So, yep, that's it for today then. Strange one, no real subjects, just the number of plants I've got that have bloomed many times. Those that have rebloomed once, so that means I've only had them a relatively short time. There are ones coming out of rescue that have bloomed but haven't done it for quite a while, so sort of waiting on those. And then there's new plants that weren't bought in bloom that have yet to bloom. So again, some are growing on, they're younger plants, and some may or may not be younger plants and may not bloom yet. You just have to wait and see. But there's a lot in here that hasn't bloomed yet that I'm confident is going to bloom next year. So hopefully we will have a bumper year next year and we'll be able to get the plants to some shows or at least to some meetings. Remains to be seen. I don't hold out loads of hope for everything getting back to normal anytime soon. I'm reasonably confident in my mind that this goes on for some time yet. And I won't say I'm happy for it to do so, but I'll live with it. Emphasis on that. And at some point, we'll all get vaccinated, and well, a lot of us will. There are some silly individuals who decide they don't like that sort of thing. Well, die then. That's the way I look at it. Please yourself. And anyway, tomorrow's video probably, unless I think of anything else, will be the rest of the repotting video from yesterday. We got them out of their pots, and tomorrow we'll be putting them in their new pots with their new media and all that sort of stuff. It's quite a long video. Well, I think it's 35 minutes. Given the number of plants, it's not ridiculously long because it's a continuous film. 1, 2, 3, 7, 8 plants, something like that. Anyway, I did it in one, and it is one video, not split into two, so there's that one to go. Right, joke. I'm going to mess this one up because it's got colours in it, and it's easy to get it wrong, but I will see what I can do. Right, we came from a very, very poor family, and when our granddad died, he always said he wanted to die in a blue suit, and all he had was a tatty old black one. So he's gone off to the funeral parlour to be laid out in his tatty old black suit, and said to the guy there he really wanted to die in a blue suit, but we can't afford another suit, not to bury somebody in, so he'll have to go in the black one, I'm afraid. And a few days later we went down just before the funeral to sort of pay our last respects sort of thing, and there's Grandad in the blue suit that he always wanted. And the guy said, "Oh, I sorted your suit out for you." He said, "We can't pay you any money." He said, no, it's not going to cost you a thing. What actually happened was another guy had died and come in, and the family said that he wanted to be buried in a black suit. So we just swapped the heads. See you next time.